So I think there's sort of two problems. One is the values that are used to determine what it means to become a superior posthuman. If you say like we're gonna make ourselves better, well, better is
by what standard? Yeah.
By what standard?
And welcome back to Cult of Just Weird. What you're about to hear is part 3 of a 3-part interview about the transhumanist movement, its offshoots, and its cultural impact. If you'd like to listen to the first 2 episodes in that series, that would be the previous and previous episode to this one. Now, without further ado, here's the final piece of my chat with Dr. Émile Torres. I want to talk about your journey and even my journey, honestly, within this idea of TESCREALism or singularitarian or whatever I would have called myself. Like a lot of the things that these guys say are sort of at first blush hard to disagree with. Like, we want to improve the human condition and lessen suffering. We want to create the most good for the most people is like what effective altruists say, right? So where does that go wrong? Like, how does that, and I know we've talked about it a little bit already, but what takes that good stuff and turns it into bad stuff?
Yeah, I mean, fantastic question. There are a bunch of things to say. I think maybe one thing to mention or to start with is something that you had pointed to earlier, which is this notion of shut up and multiply. Mm-hmm. And so that was illustrated by Émile, very much a part of the TESCREAL bundle, a transhumanist who participated in the extropian movement, was a big singularitarian. He hired Ben Goertzel, the leading cosmist, to head his Singularity Institute. He founded rationalism, has played a huge part in development of EA and long-termism. So, okay, sorry, but this is precisely why we came up with the acronym. That is too much to say.
Right.
So he is a TESCREAList. That's the much more economical way of putting it. So he argued that if you take seriously this idea that morality comes down to the mathematics, then if you're presented in a forced choice situation between two possibilities. One is that a single individual is tortured mercilessly and relentlessly for 50 years straight. And the other is that some absolutely enormous, unfathomable number of people suffer the almost imperceptible discomfort of having a speck of dust in their eye. Mm-hmm. Which of these two scenarios should you choose? In other words, which is better? Mm-hmm. And or which is worse? It would be a more intuitive way of putting it. And he argued that if you just do the math, then the second scenario of dust specks is worse. Because even though
depending on the number, if the number of people is large enough.
If it's large enough, exactly. So just do the math. Add up the tiny, tiny, tiny discomfort that each individual feels, and ultimately then the total quantity of suffering will be greater than one person being tortured brutally.
Right.
And so shut up and multiply. This is a key influential idea within these communities. I think it just illustrates one way that it goes wrong, because when you hear these ideologies and their communities advertised as valuing reason, rationality, science, evidence, clear thinking, and so on, that sounds really good. Mm-hmm. And then you see that their understanding of what it means to be rational and ethical and so on leads them to say, oh, we should pick the person being tortured for 50 years because that is less bad than, a bazillion people.
But what if that person's really annoying, though? I mean, then it stands to reason, I think.
Yeah, maybe there are other factors that
like maybe if it was me, then people would be like, okay.
Right.
Yeah, I think this is Lee Off podcast too, but my wife co-host and I we discussed the mote and the eye thing a lot. And I actually take the Eliezer position about like, well, if it's big enough, and she's like, no, you're an idiot. I think she's right, but it's, we talk about it a lot. All right, I have to break us here because I feel like we need to revisit the mote discussion.
I don't want to.
You want to describe my face right now?
No, I want to describe what I'm feeling because I'm feeling...
My grinning, devilish face.
I'm feeling unbridled rage.
Okay.
First of all, you think I'm right?
Well, all right. Right is a pretty definitive statement in a world where...
Because you've never said that to me.
Well, first of all, I'm not going to admit that to you, like in your face. Okay, like I'm not a bad arguer. Second of all, right again is it's a relative sort of thing. Okay, let me back up. I do think that your position, the position that people take that, well, actually, I don't even know your position now that I think about it, because there's kind of like two positions. There's like you're pro mote or you're pro torture, and I kind of feel like your position is like, this is stupid.
Okay, that's two different things.
So I'm not sure what, like, I think that the people that are ultimately don't torture the person, I think have the more correct position.
Yeah,
I have a hard time squaring that with a utilitarian. I don't think you can square that with a utilitarian view, which either points to the bankruptcy of the utilitarian view, which I think is kind of what Dr. Torres was saying.
What it does for me.
Or it just makes it challenging. And I'm not sure if the utilitarian view is totally bankrupt. I tend to think of it as like there are different situations and scenarios in which different tools in the toolbox are useful. And I think sometimes it is, you do have to shut up and multiply and do the math. I think sometimes that is what is required to make a good decision. I don't think that it's always that, but I think that if we didn't have that in our toolbox, I think that we'd be down a tool. Yeah, you can't disagree with that, can you?
What I can agree with you here is that I think that there's a fundamental flaw in the setup of the thought experiment.
Okay.
It feels like we're trying to say like, oh, the calculations that go into quantifying the suffering that is the result of horrendous 50 years of torture and the calculations that go into quantifying the like mote of dust in trillions of people's eyes, like...
Oh, trillions is so unbelievably smaller than the number they're talking about is to not even be
I
zero.
know, but that makes it even worse for me, and that's a different thing. I think that the bigger the number gets, the more ridiculous and absolutely like unhinged the question is, and makes me go like, I want to go back and revisit our Less Wrong episodes and get even more angry. But that's a personal problem. I don't think that it's apples and oranges, my guy. Like,
So I agree with you. And I think that actually I might even mention kind of what you're talking about. I think I might mention that as part of my belief about this to Dr. Torres in a few minutes here in the interview. But I think part of the problem is, like multiplying when I say extreme large numbers, when I say extremely larger than trillions,
right?
Like you wouldn't believe. Okay.
Right.
Like the number they're talking about is in a notation that if you were to write the number down on paper, not only is there not enough paper in the universe, there's not even, if you wrote a single number on every single atom in the universe, even that wouldn't be enough to write the number down, not the number of atoms in the universe. If the number of atoms in the universe each constituted a little piece of paper to write a number down, still wouldn't be enough to write the number down in regular notation. Unfathomably large number.
Right.
Just to level set what they're talking about.
So large as to not functionally exist.
As to cease to have like meaning, right? Like we have numbers that are that small. We have the Planck length, right? So I kind of feel like at a certain point, numbers get large enough that like morality, like your normal day-to-day morality calculations just aren't relevant anymore.
Right.
And this kind of goes a little bit with what I think we're going to talk about in the bonus episode with Pascal's mugging, is that when you do start to get like arbitrarily large numbers multiplied against like some increasingly small percentage benefit or whatever, then like decision theory just kind of goes out the window. So I agree with that. I will also say that in the intervening time since I talked to Émile, and also obviously since we had our previous Rocco's Basilisk episode several years ago, when I was doing the Less Wrong research, of course, I found the Mode of Dust post because you have to.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like famous. Like if I didn't research that, I wouldn't have done my research properly.
It's the thing tearing our marriage apart. So I'm glad you went back to the scene of the crime.
Right. Well, exactly. And I want to get more tools in my toolbox on how to tear our marriage apart. So I went there and I read it. There was a good argument against it that I hadn't thought. A poster replied with an argument in favor of please don't torture the guy. Mode of Dust is fine. But they argued it in a way that was like within the mathematics.
Oh, see, that's good. That's not what I can do, but that's good.
Right. And that's why it was like very compelling to me. So basically.
But also that's like, sorry. Yeah,
but you know what though? But rage though. Still rage. Don't worry. You can keep your rage.
No,
put your rage in a little box.
That was the right thing to do.
Put your rage in a little box. It's totally fine. So their argument was of the form, okay, you have to consider recovery time.
That's real good.
One person being tortured for 50 years, assuming that they even can live an amount of time in order to recover from that. God knows how long you'd have to live, hundreds of years maybe, to recover fully from something like that.
Right.
Who knows? If you consider the recovery time of, and just to bring it back down to like an understandable number, let's just say trillions, even though trillions is basically zero.
That's why I said trillions earlier.
You know what? You were correct. If you consider the recovery time of trillions of people, yes, maybe the recovery time, if you add it all together, might be longer than, the 300 years it would take for the tortured person to recover. But they're all doing the recovery. You multiply the recovery times the number of people the same way you do the discomfort times the number of people. So the recovery time for the Mode of Dust is roughly 1 nanosecond. Because the multiplication happens on both sides.
Right.
The multiplication happens on the discomfort side and also on the recovery side. And I thought that was actually a really compelling argument.
That is a really compelling argument. One I probably would not have arrived at on my own in those terms. So thank you, poster, for...
Me either. And I'm like pro math. And I think that utilitarianism has a place.
Pro math in this case, though.
It's like saying pro-life.
No, it's...
You're anti-math. Why are you anti-math, Kayla? Why do you hate math?
I want to just touch on the second reason why I have rage about this thought experiment.
This is going to have to be its own episode.
Is just the thought experiment itself. It just, I think part of what bothers me about it is that it just feels like the ones that walk away from Omelas. It just feels like a lopsided version of that. Like, the ones who walk away from Omelas, very famous short story by Ursula K. Le Guin. In very short story, everybody go read it. It is posited that there's like a town that exists called Omelas, and everybody in the town prospers and is happy, and their children have enough to eat, and they're all joyous and running around. But the only way to make this happen is that locked away in a closet somewhere is a child who is horrendously abused all of the time. And tortured. This child's suffering and the joy of the entire town are linked. The joy is dependent on the suffering.
What I like about this short story, by the way, is that it takes us back down to normal numbers. So it's like much more compelling, I think, to talk about.
I think the numbers, yes, but I think the more compelling thing is the levels of experience are actually like on the same balance. The joy
That's what I mean.
And prosperity of an entire town being dependent on the suffering and isolation and torture of a single person. That I can wrap my head around. And maybe I'm stupid.
No, that's what I mean, actually.
Maybe I'm a dumbass
no, that's literally
and
what
I
I
can't
mean.
get the quadrillions of people, but I just feel like that is
you're a human with human experiences, and human experiences is easier to digest a town full of people, not a multiverse full of people.
It's a more compelling story and thought experiment to me, and I highly recommend everybody go read it. You can't put the math on it, though. That's the thing. You can't. It's not a utilitarian story. It has that utilitarian trapping. I think it's not ultimately because of the conclusion. I don't want to spoil it too much. Versus the conclusions that are being drawn on Less Wrong, which is what we just talked about. Like, how do we quantify things like recovery? It's all about the quantifying. And I think the ones who walk away from Omelas is trying to get away from
the ones who walk away from Less Wrong.
Yeah. Isn't that more right or whatever?
So, yeah, that's more right. Okay.
I should shut up now.
Yes. No. In general, yeah. But yes, I think that is kind of what that short story is saying. But I also think that short story is more than anything just asking us to like think about this scenario and like the ways in which we make these types of calculations in our own civilization, because we do.
Right.
And to be completely fair, like, I think that, and this is my other big point that I want to make, I think that's all that the less wrongers were doing too. Like,
sure.
I think they get a lot of heat for this particular thought experiment.
From me personally.
From you personally. Well, if you calculate all of the heat mathematically that they get in the world, like roughly half of it comes from Kayla. There's a little bit from Emile, and then the rest is from everybody else. No, but I think that, like, when I went into the post and like read the initial post, read all the replies, my sense wasn't that like somebody was saying, or even that Eliezer himself was saying, hey guys, I just wanted to give you this scenario and tell you what the correct answer was.
Right.
It was, hey, we have this utilitarian mindset. So I'm going to purposely pick something. Like, that was the whole point of the thought experiment, was to pick something as horrible as possible on one side with the smallest number.
Right.
And as like literally the reason mode of dust he chose in the post, the reason he chose mode of dust was because he was like, what is the least, like something that's still discomforting, but like the minimum thing that's discomforting.
Right.
So it was purposely chosen that way as like a thought experiment to consider these utilitarian ideas and like, where do they break? If they break, let's discuss this. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I don't know. I just think that it gets kind of miscast as like, do you see what these idiots believe?
I think ultimately one of the things it might boil down to is that some people are going to extrapolate more like value and learning and meaning making out of the post on Less Wrong, and some people are going to extract more value and learning and meaning making out of something like the ones who walk away from Omelas. And those are just two different kinds of people. These are just two different approaches to a similar thought experiment. And I'm just enraged.
No, I think you're right. Like, I think that the sort of like online debate, and in this case, as I've said in the Less Wrong episodes, very respectful debate.
Right.
But I definitely think that's still like either an acquired taste or like something that it doesn't appeal to everybody. I know that my sort of like penchant for like getting into like heated discussions with people is pretty rare. I acknowledge that.
I don't think it is.
Well, the fact that I like it and at the end I'm not like, God, piece of shit. I think that's pretty rare. So I agree with you that the ones that walk away from Omelas is much more of like a digestible sort of parable because it's like a narrative form. Yeah, just I guess long way to say that I agree with what you just said. There's some people who might find that to be more palatable.
Boom! I win. I win the debate. I win it all. I win Less Wrong. I win the argument. The end.
Okay, but you better thank that guy that posted about the recovery time thing.
I did. I said thank you to the poster, and I say thank you
You
again.
already did. Wow, that was fast. We were just talking about it. Okay. I think that we should go back to the interview now.
Yes, we should.
I feel like part of the problem with utilitarianism and even with the long-termism is actually people think that things scale and things don't scale. Especially when you're talking about something like ethics or morality or human behavior. I think that things do scale within a certain limit of like small numbers that we are used to dealing with. Like the trolley problem, you can kind of answer, right? You can kind of say, well, I'd like to save the 5 people, I guess. And I think that makes sense. But I think at some point there's like a phase change where it kind of doesn't matter if you have 10 to the 58 people and you multiply that by the 0.001 of utility that they lose from having the mote in the eye compared to the one person being tortured, because we've gotten into sort of like a different realm of thinking. And I think that actually kind of comes into play with the long-termism as well, is like, well, there's so many people and it's so far in the future that it kind of like jumps beyond the point where we can really actually have a rational discussion about it in this sort of utilitarian framework. Because I still think that there's some like value to utilitarianism. I just think that like when it gets absurd to absurd degrees with the mote in the eye example, I think that's where it just really breaks down. Let me turn this into a question. So do you think there's like something fundamentally like we're misusing utilitarianism here, or do you think that there's like still a value to sometimes multiplying, I guess?
My view is, I would say it's a bit complex, although I'm oftentimes annoyed when people describe their own views that way, as if they're like a more nuanced thinker than others. I don't mean it that way, but I guess part of the issue is, I don't think utilitarianism is completely worthless as an ethical theory. Mm-hmm. You mentioned the trolley problem. Like, in a situation where, there are different variants of it, of course, but like the standard case is you're standing next to a railroad track lever, and that would switch the track so that the trolley would go straight or to the side. And in that situation, it's sort of like you are actively involved in it, but you're also sort of a passive actor because the trolley is going to kill somebody.
It's already happening.
So it's already happening, yeah. And so in that situation, it does seem right. I would pull the lever so it only kills one person, although I would feel sick about that still. I would feel sick about the situation.
Yeah.
But I think utilitarianism, I feel like it's a good theory to sort of have in one's moral toolbox, but it's just one of many tools. And I think like deontological constraints are really important. I myself am probably most aligned with a theory called moral particularism. And,
I have not heard of that.
Yeah, so it's basically, so it could be understood as the opposite of a moral generalist approach. And moral generalism is what characterizes most of the other major theories within Western ethics. So consequentialism or utilitarianism, deontology, and so on. What makes it that generalist? The fact that they are trying to identify these general rules for good ethical behavior that apply, and hopefully it's just a very small number, maybe it's just one in the case of utilitarianism, maximize utility, that these rules that apply in every single situation at any point in time, past or future. And so part of one of the particular critiques is that like maybe that's just the wrong way to think about ethics. Maybe ethics isn't like science in this sense. Like in science, we try to at least like fundamental science, we try to come up with these laws that are invariant, as philosophers say, invariant across space and time. So, Einstein's equations for gravity are supposed to work here on Earth no less than they work in the most distant galaxies, across the universe, 93 million light years away. And so maybe ethics isn't like that. Maybe that works for science. Maybe there are these invariant laws that this is just the way reality is everywhere at all times. But maybe ethics is more like the domain of comedy. It's like there are no rules of comedy. Like if there were, I would be a stand-up comedian because I just like memorize the rules. I go up there, tell the jokes in every situation, no matter where you are, which culture, cultural context, and so on. Here are the rules for being funny. But comedy isn't like that. It like really depends on the particular situation. It's like, you could even say there are guidelines. Right? Like one thing that makes often characterizes a joke is a violation of expectation, right? Yeah. You think somebody's going to say something, they say the opposite, it took you off guard, that's funny. But like that's not a hard and fast rule because like I could, throw something right now as we're talking that would break a window, that would violate an expectation.
Right.
You wouldn't think that's funny. You'd be like,
I would think it was hilarious. Wait, whose window actually?
Right.
Yeah.
But like that would be like, that would be weird if I did it. Not
yeah.
Funny. So maybe ethics is like that. And so that's kind of my view. It's like, I think utilitarianism is an instance of this generalist approach to ethics that maybe is just wrong. And I would say in addition to that, it's the quantitative approach of utilitarianism that also, in my view, makes it problematic. Thinking that ethics is just a matter of adding up the numbers and basically treating people, you and I, as mere means to an end. Because you and I have zero intrinsic value on the utilitarian view. We have only instrumental value as a means to an end, to the end of maximizing value. And like I said before, we're just the containers. We're just these fungible, replaceable units. So I also object to that view that like we should create new happy people because
Right.
people are just these means to an end. No, I think people are ends in and of themselves, which is a very kind of deontological way of thinking about it.
Yeah.
So does that make sense?
Totally. Actually, I think what you're saying makes a lot of sense. I think, I don't know if I've been like, certainly haven't heard the term. I said I haven't heard the term, but like in my head, I kind of feel like that matches me personally in large part too. You brought up some good points about the trolley problem specifically. First is that, it's kind of already smuggling some assumptions in there that we don't really talk about. Like we just talk about it as, well, 1 versus 5, right? What's it? But okay, actually there's a lot of assumptions about like, where did the trolley come from? Like, why is it there? Why am I there? Who put me there? There's actually all this context that makes my decision go one way or the other in the trolley problem that isn't just 1 versus 5. What is moral or ethical in one case may not be in another case. And I think that's like a scary thought, but I think it's kind of unavoidable. Like, I don't think it just doesn't feel like you can universalize, kind of like what you're saying. You can't universalize something, a law, around something like ethics or morality.
Yeah. So that is sort of my approach to thinking about these things. And that's why I said it's complex without like trying to,
right.
to compliment.
It is, though. It is.
Yeah.
You said on a previous episode of this interview that you were a TESCREAList. You would call yourself a TESCREAList yourself, probably before you coined the term, but now that's what you would call it. So what was that journey like? What brought you from being into that stuff to being more like, warning about its dangers? Because I got to admit, like, there's things that I'm like, I want to live forever. Like, that would be cool. The Matrix would be fun. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, so I think there are two problems with the eugenic aspect of transhumanism. And part of the transhumanist project is like figuring out how to live forever, to overcome diseases and the aging process and so on, which also sounds kind of good to me. Mm-hmm. I like a lot of other people, I have death anxiety. I don't want to die, And so I think there's sort of two problems. One is the values that are used to determine what it means to become a superior posthuman. If you say like we're going to make ourselves better, well, better is
what standard? Yeah.
By what standard? It's a normative term, meaning you need some norms or criteria or values to understand how that word is being used or defined. So one of the problems then concerns the values that underlie this notion of human betterment or perfection or transcendence. There's a lot of ableism. That a sort of defining feature of a post-human utopia is that there's no disability. Yep. There's this notion that, okay, we're going to be more intelligent. Well, what does intelligence mean?
Obviously IQ.
Right. So IQ is like this super limited way of thinking about intelligence. I mean, IQ, the concept, IQ tests and so on were developed by various eugenicists in the 20th century who were super racist and really sexist, and they thought, women they're not as intelligent. There's certain racial groups that are less intelligent than other groups, and so consequently it was shaped by individuals who were deeply motivated by these prejudices. So this notion of IQ sort of has inherited some of those deeply problematic ideas.
Yeah.
So all of it's just to say that on the one hand, it's just the criteria according to which they are defining post-humanity that I think is really problematic. And then I also think that in practice, the process of trying to become post-human would probably have pretty catastrophic consequences. So we hinted at this earlier, like on the one hand, it could massively increase wealth inequality, could make the rich even richer than they are. I mean, since 2020, the 5 richest individuals in the world have doubled their wealth, while the bottom 60%, which is roughly 5 billion, have seen their wealth decline. With these enhancement technologies, like you could expect that to be amplified greatly. But also there was this philosopher named Robert Sparrow who had this really good paper where he pointed out that, so imagine like a bunch of parents who have the option of radically enhancing their children. Let's imagine that they are embedded in a racist, sexist, homophobic society. Maybe a society exactly like ours. And now, if they are rational and if they're inclined towards consequentialism, so what matters for the rightness or wrongness of their actions is the actual consequences, then they're going to be inclined, if they're rational, to ensure that their children are men, are white, are straight, and so on. Because straight, neurotypical, exactly. So, because those people are the ones who do best in our racist, homophobic, sexist society, right? And so, as more and more parents choose to have children like this, the individuals, the parents who have objected and resisted this urge, they're going to become increasingly the minority. And so there's more and more pressure for them to say, well, I don't want to have a kid who is not white, because now 90% of society is white. And just think about how all of the opportunities that my child is going to be denied by virtue of their skin color. And so he points out, like, it really could just take 1 or 2 generations for society to homogenize and ultimately to become exactly the sort of society that those old eugenicists from the 20th century wanted to bring about. Blonde hair, blue eyes, white men, and so on.
Right. Kind of without even intending, which is interesting because I forget the vocab word, but I know that TESCREALists differentiate themselves, particularly transhumanists, combat the eugenicist label by saying, well, we are not like, I think you use the term first wave eugenicist. Yeah. We're not like that. We're not top down. It's okay because we're a democracy. It's going to be a ground up. I know they use a term like genealogical something or other. It's ground up. So
morphological freedom.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it'll be fine this time. Yeah. But the scenario you just described was literally that. And because of these forces that people don't really like to think or talk about, it would just push us into that same thing anyway.
Yeah. So I think that is a key point, because they'll say, well, our version of eugenics is not authoritarian. The old eugenics in the US and in Germany and elsewhere, where there are forced sterilizations and so on. No, this is a liberal form of eugenics. So you get to choose whether you want to be enhanced or not.
You get to choose whether you want to be in a lower class or have all of the benefits. It's totally up to you.
Exactly. Yes. So the state doesn't need to be involved for there to be a kind of illiberalism to this whole situation. Because when you're in a society and you're a college student and half of your peers are enhancing their minds with these nootropics, drugs, like they're taking modafinil or whatever to enable themselves to sleep for just 2 hours a day, study more, and so on and so on. You're going to feel enormous pressure. If you're a parent and all the other parents around are enhancing, or even just 10% of parents are radically enhancing their children so they have a leg up, those kids are able to sit still in class better than the other kids who are just normal and can't be sitting for 8 hours a day. Then there is this invisible hand, if you will, that is deeply oppressive and is going to be forcing them to make a decision. I feel like one of the more explicit acknowledgments of this illiberal aspect to so-called liberal eugenics was in Ray Kurzweil's 2005 book, The Singularity is Near. Yeah, so he has...
That book has been enormously influential on me, and I would say when I read it in 2006 or 7 is a big reason why I think I sort of went down that singularitarian path.
Yeah.
So it's and I know that stands to reason, right? It's like the Bible of singularitarianism, but anyway,
that book was also what got me into transhumanism in the first place.
Right.
Yeah. And so he has this fictional conversation with Ned Ludd, whose name gave us the term Luddite, of course. And so in this conversation, Ludd is saying, what if I don't want to genetically modify myself to become a posthuman?
Right.
And Kurzweil's response is, well, if you don't want to do that, that is completely fine. We're not authoritarians. You are free to do whatever you want. But if you don't genetically enhance yourself, then you won't be around for very long to influence the debate. And to me, that is kind of a chilling statement. you're going to get left behind, if I may use that term once again.
That callback. Excellent.
Yeah, good callback. So you'll get left behind. And in that sense, it's like Kurzweil is acknowledging, okay, yeah, this is quote unquote liberal, but do you really have a choice? No, you don't.
I mean, in a way, it's almost like more dangerous than top down because it's like
insidious.
Yeah, exactly. It's like it's easier to just kind of let it in. Ugh.
Yeah. So these are some of my problems with transhumanism. And, I do not accept the anti-transhumanist argument that we should not pursue radical human enhancement because that's playing God. I don't have any problem fundamentally with modifying ourselves. And as a matter of fact, if our species exists for long enough, over the next 100,000 plus years, we will evolve into a post-human species. That is inevitable.
Right. It'll happen. Yeah.
Unless we use genetic technology to fix our genotypes in some way.
In some, yeah.
But otherwise, we will evolve. So I don't have a problem with that. It's just like it's on the one hand, it's what are the values that determine who we should become as post-humans, and on the other hand, it's like in practice, it just looks like it's going to be absolutely disastrous. It's going to worsen wealth disparities and could result in a homogenization of society, which is exactly what some of the transhumanists say, oh, well, we want a diversity of different kind of post-human beings. Well, I don't know. In practice, is that going to happen? I don't think so.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that's most attractive to me, and I think probably most people, and is also number one on the agenda, the anti-aging. I don't think, even me, who was like, oh man, anti-aging, yes, let's do it. I don't know how you can look at that and say that's going to be rich people are going to get it first and there's going to be a feedback effect there, right? That's plain as day. You don't even have to be particularly into the stuff to see that that's the case.
A couple years ago, there was a clip from an interview with Jared Kushner that was being passed around my circles of him saying, we may be the first generation to never die. And just seeing him say that just underlined it. If we got radical life extension technologies in the next few years, Donald Trump could be. I'm
going to cue a sound effect of brakes screeching here.
Right. Right.
So was it that notion that sort of this is going to probably exacerbate existing problems? Was that the thing that kind of started pushing you away from it, or was it something else? Was it a particular moment in time?
So it was that, and there were really two other things. One is related, I guess, which has to do with realizing that the particular utopian vision that is at the heart of this bundle of ideologies was designed almost entirely by a bunch of super privileged white dudes at elite universities like Oxford and in Silicon Valley, who were all very libertarian, kind of neoliberal in their political leanings. And consequently, this vision, which is basically an extension of techno-capitalism, is deeply impoverished. And so I've said before, one of the most striking features of the TESCREAL literature is that there's almost no acknowledgement even of much less serious consideration of what the future could or should look like from alternative perspectives. There's no discussion of indigenous communities and what the future might look like from their particular traditions. A lot of them have visions of the future.
Sure.
Islam, even. I mean, I'm very much an atheist, but given the fact that religion is growing around the world, not shrinking, on the global stage, religion is increasing. Islam is the fastest growing religion in the world. There'll be almost 3 billion Muslims in the world by 2050, 2.6 billion to be more exact. I don't know how you can be a serious futurist and just ignore that.
Right.
Just pretend religion doesn't exist. No, if you want to seriously talk about what the future should look like, you need to take seriously these various alternative perspectives of what the future could be. And I think it's not enough to just even acknowledge that these perspectives exist or try to incorporate them into your vision of the future. There's a colleague of mine whose name is Monica Bielskita, and the way she puts it is that you can never design for, you must always design with. So this is a claim about the process.
Right? That's good.
It's really good. So it's not even enough to say we're sensitive to social justice issues and sensitive to the fact that there are these cultural perspectives and so on. But you need to include in the design process voices that represent these particular perspectives. And if you don't do that, then the utopia that you are designing is going to be a dystopia for most people. And so this is why I've argued that avoiding an existential catastrophe would be absolutely catastrophic.
Interesting.
It's a weird way to put it.
Right,
the idea is that if we avoid an existential catastrophe, then by definition, we will have realized the utopian vision at the heart of the TESCREAL bundle. And if we realize that utopian vision at the heart of the TESCREAL bundle, I think that would be completely catastrophic for most of humanity, because there is just no place for other cultures, for other thought traditions, and so on. There's just this vision is just all about just maximizing value, going out, plundering the universe. It's not even clear that the natural world, that non-human creatures have a future in this utopia that they're trying to bring about. So, like, for example, Will MacAskill, one of the leading figures in this TESCREAL movement, wrote in his 2022 book, What We Owe the Future, that our systematic obliteration of the biosphere might be net positive. And the reason for that is that, well, wild animals suffer because they're engaged in this Darwinian struggle.
This is such a bizarre. Yeah, please.
So the fewer wild animals there are, the less wild animal suffering there will be. And so
it's like the reverse of the, like, we should make more people because people happy.
Exactly. Right. So he claims that people in general have net positive lives. He further claims that wild animals in general probably have net negative lives. So if you take this utilitarian view, then if you eliminate those beings, even if they're sentient beings that have net negative lives, you are increasing the total amount of value, because they were subtracting value.
They were right.
So this is the kind of logic. So it's, would indigenous communities, would Muslims, would people who embody different views on what the world ought to look like, would they have any place in the utopian world? Utopia by its nature is exclusionary. It always leaves out something. If there are non-believers in the Christian heaven, it's not heaven. If there are capitalists in the communist utopia, then it's not utopia. Something's gone wrong. Who's left out of this utopia that they're trying to bring about? Actually, I think it's most of humanity. And in fact, I think it's probably most living creatures on Earth. And so that is also what led me to go like, wow, this utopian vision is just fundamentally
very exclusionary. Yeah. Well, it kind of reminds me of the whole, like, they're totally chill with the fact that they expect 10 of them to survive the apocalypse because that's the only people they really kind of gave a shit about in the first place. And that would maximize value after all. It just kind of brings it back to that. Is there anything good? Like you said, you still think that human enhancement, for example, it could be something that is good with a lot of caveats about, how we manage it and what we value when we bring it about. Do you have other examples of that? Like things where you're like, well, I still like this concept. It's just, when it's not bastardized into some weird, shut up and multiply situation, it could be a good thing that we do.
Nothing really occurs to me.
Should I get a Neuralink because it'll let me play Civilization? That seems pretty good.
I would probably not advise that one does that. I'd be worried about, like, I don't know, that's a very intimate, invasive technology. And a lot of these companies, their business model is based on surveillance capitalism, the collection of data. There's all sorts of ways you could collect data if you have a neural chip. So I would be very worried. I mean, in the real world, I am deeply opposed to transhumanism and a lot of these technologies in a very abstract sense. I'm much less opposed and would make an argument that they could potentially be used for good. I mean, it's a similar thing. It's like saying, a lot of philosophers would say that torture in a completely idealized situation where for a fact that it's effective, for a fact that 10 billion people are going to die and so on, they would say, yes, you should torture this individual. But the large majority of those philosophers, myself included, would say in the real world, we will never, ever, ever have anything like that.
Right.
And so all these thought experiments about the ticking time bomb and would you torture someone, they're just irrelevant. And so that's sort of how I feel about a lot of these ideologies. Like, yes, I don't know, in a vacuum where you're controlling every single aspect of the scenario or situation, and you know with certainty that it's this way or that way, then like, okay, yeah, maybe then human enhancement might be completely fine if you know that it's done democratically and everybody is aware of the pitfalls of eugenic thinking, that certain groups of people are better, that humanity can be organized in a hierarchy and so on. And when people have like completely eradicated all of these biases, then should we modify humanity? I don't know. Sure. But in the real
there was a lot of assumptions that you just said there. Yeah.
Huge amount of assumptions. And so that's sort of how I mean, maybe the one thing I would say, which is not so much doesn't concern a value judgment, but nonetheless is related, I think, to your question, concerns the singularity. Mm-hmm. And so it's not so much a claim that, okay, like maybe there's a version of the singularity that might actually be good if this advanced technology were actually used to benefit all of humanity, which I think in the real world it absolutely won't be. It'll just empower the already powerful. Nonetheless, I would say that I think it is possible that we create technology that is completely transformative. And I am somewhat skeptical of these arguments that we might, have an intelligence explosion, one of the definitions of the singularity. I am skeptical that that's even like physically possible for various reasons.
Sure.
Really good article by a philosopher named David Thorstad called, I think it's Against the Singularity Hypothesis, which basically explains my view, but he articulates in a way that is more sophisticated than I possibly could. So I'm skeptical of that, but nonetheless, I think it's possible. And that worries me. So I'm not just saying like, oh, the singularity idea is ridiculous because it's never, ever going to happen. I don't know. It could. And we might be in a world where we create these machines that are able to solve problems and process information much, much better, much, much faster than we possibly could. But I'm anxious about that world. Does that make sense? So it's a kind of like, I don't know, it could happen, but I don't see any really good outcome.
Right. So what's the action item then for all of us that are concerned about this? Like, is there anything that we should be doing to try and combat some of the more like, nefarious bits that we've been talking about?
Yeah. So this is, I think, a really important question that I don't have a good answer to. I don't really know what we should do. In the TESCREAL FAQ, frequently asked questions that I'll publish soon, the last question is exactly this. And I mentioned that a primary goal of future research projects is to try to formulate a good answer.
Yeah.
What can we do? What should we do? Should we go stand outside of OpenAI and protest? Should people actually join hands with some of the doomer TESCREAL people? Like, I don't think so, but that's, one possibility. Beyond that, I'm just not really sure. I mean, these companies and the TESCREAL individuals who have founded these companies and now run them, they are massively powerful. And someone like me, I just publish articles in Truthdig and Salon and various other. So I'm just sort of screaming into the void. I really don't know what to do. That's
okay. Yeah.
Why I'm deeply pessimistic about the future. So,
back in the beginning of the interview, we were sort of talking about the eschatological nature of this bundle of beliefs, and I've seen takes where AGI is being akin to summoning God. Mm-hmm. You talked about singularity, rapture for nerds, right? So I guess the question then is, does this bundle, do TESCREALists constitute a cult? I got to get the name of the podcast. I got to brand the interview here.
Yeah. I would say that there is a good case to make that that a lot of these communities are run like a cult. It might sound hyperbolic, but I really don't think it is. So take EA, for example. It is very hierarchical. There's a lot of hero worship. I mean, by their own admission, you could find them talking about this. People in the EA community have said there's way too much hero worship. There's a lot of worship of McCaskill and Toby Ord, Elias Yudkowsky, and Nick Bostrom and so on. You sort of like, if you're on one of the lower rungs of this hierarchy, you oftentimes need some kind of permission to do certain things. The Center for Effective Altruism has guidelines for what people in the EA community should and should not say to journalists. They tested a ranking system, secretly tested an internal ranking system of members of the EA community based in part on IQ. So members who have an IQ of less than 100 would get points removed. Once they have an IQ of 120, then they can start to have points added. Oh, all of this sounds very cultish. They even do something, many members participate in what they call doom circles, where you get in a circle and you criticize each other one at a time. And if you that is for sure. Right. And if you go on the EA forum website, you can find the statement that they begin each critique with. And it is like, for the greater good, for the benefit of this individual and the aim of improving themselves and their epistemic hygiene and so on. It sounds so bizarre. I mean, there are many, many examples. There's a lot of myth making in the community. The leading figures like McCaskill basically propagated lies about Sam Bankman-Fried, one of the saints of the EA rationalist long-termist community. He drove a beat-up Toyota Corolla and lived this very humble lifestyle. What they didn't tell you, what they knew, was that Bankman-Fried lived in a huge mansion and owned $300 million in Bahamian real estate. So it's just like, a lot of the televangelists who, preach one thing and then have private jets, who are flying around in private jets without anybody really supposed to know about that. McCaskill himself celebrated the release of his book, What We Owe the Future, by partying at a ultra luxurious vegan restaurant in New York City, where the menu started at, I think it was $430 per person. And then, a couple months later, he went on The Daily Show and boasted to Trevor Noah that he gives away more than 50% of his income. Well, yeah, but he's got a bunch of millionaire, billionaire friends who pay for him to go down to the Bahamas and eat at these ultra luxurious restaurants and so on. So anyways, there's probably 50 more things to say about that, but it is very, very cultish in many ways. And in fact, when I was part of the community, we had a number of conversations about whether or not we are part of a cult.
Interesting.
I have even, here's my last thing I'll say, I've even had, this is 100% true, I've had family members of some of the leading EAs contact me in private to say that they're worried their family member is part of a cult.
Oh my gosh. Some of the things you mentioned are pretty classic.
Yeah.
So I just have one more question before I let you go. Are you worried that this interview is going to get you tortured by a future super intelligent robot? Or maybe the interview itself is the torture. Maybe you're already being tortured.
No, this was fun. This is fun. This is not a version of hell. I've done some interviews that I wanted to escape. This was a whole lot of fun. I mean, yeah, good question. I mean, there's this idea of Rocco's basilisk.
Yep.
Yeah. So for all I know, I might end up being tortured. Maybe this would be presented as evidence. I remember Colbert. He once showed a clip of a trend that was going around TikTok and YouTube of people who were taking their old dryer outside and plugging it in with an extension cord and then turning the dryer on with a cinder block or brick in it. And these are hilarious videos. If you watch it, the dryer will self-destruct over 10 minutes. And it's pretty funny. And anyways, the reason I mention this is that he suggested that this would be Exhibit A when humanity is on trial by the machines. Like,
right.
well,
look what you did to these poor dryer machines. Yeah.
Mistreated us so horribly.
I know. Yeah. And after they did so much for us.
Yeah. So I don't know, maybe this interview and, my writings opposing the creation of superintelligence would be used against me. I don't know.
Well, if this gets you tortured forever in the future, then I apologize. But if it doesn't, then I'll just say, I really appreciate your time and expertise on this. I've had a lot of fun talking to you.
Maybe we'll be there together.
Yes.
And you can apologize to me face to
right,
face.
while we're getting our lashes or whatever the robot does.
Yeah. Cool.
Right.
Great chatting with you.
So there you have it. It's a cult. Honestly,
Our job's done.
it was more culty than I thought. With that, when I asked that last question, I thought it was going to be like, oh yeah, they use some weird jargon. But then Émile kept going on about these different things that were like, no, that's mega culty. What are you talking about?
Yeah, I might have some follow-ups for Dr. Torres. I want to know more about these shame circles.
Yeah,
And we definitely need to look up the vocabulary and the verbiage that's used, and I want to know what these family members, when they're saying hello, is my family member in a cult, I want to know if they're are they looking for deprogrammers? I have some follow-ups for Dr. Torres, and I'm very grateful that they shared those little culty tidbits with us.
Yeah, it's funny because I keep going back and forth on, because that was mostly, it sounded like it was about TESCREAL, but it sounded like with a heavy emphasis on the EA part.
Yeah.
On the effective altruist community. And I keep going back and forth on that where I'm like, oh man, these guys are earn to give. That's so culty and dumb. But then I'll read stuff, or I'll, talk to someone and get this sense that it's no, they're just trying to do the most good with the fewest amount of resources. That's smart. And then I'll hear stuff like that where I'm like, whoa. What?
Yeah.
I just have such whiplash. This whole last month and a half, 2 months of episodes, I just keep having this whiplash about the various appendages of the TESCREAL community.
I think for folks who are, not full-fledged TESCREAL lists, I think that there's a lot of take what you like and then leave the rest here. I'm sure there's a lot of cool things to be gleaned, and interesting ideas, and I hope that I'm humble enough to not think that I have all the answers and know everything about everything, and have enough curiosity to be ooh, what's going on in this community, but yeah, leave the rest. Leave it.
Yeah, there's definitely a bit to leave, such as let's talk a little bit about the eugenics thing. I think that was one of the biggest points of certainly this part of the interview, and maybe of the entire interview, is, and we've discussed this in previous episodes, we will definitely bring it up again. Transhumanism in particular has some roots in eugenics of the early 20th century.
Which was not a good
Which was not good.
Not that there's
but
a
the
good
argument
eugenics.
not that there's a good eugenics, but that's maybe some of the argument that might be put forth by certain transhumanists, is that the current version that you might call eugenics is not as bad because it's liberal eugenics. It's this new wave eugenics where it's ground up. There's no Hitler at top saying we have to sterilize these bad people.
Right.
It's people making their own choices.
Right.
And the scenario outlined in the interview makes a lot of sense, though, is if the societal pressures exist, if these structures exist, then it doesn't matter if it's, the Fuhrer saying it, or if it's ground up, if it's just this influence that has this homogenizing effect over time because everybody wants to have babies that are the most adapted to whatever societal conditions we have. And we were talking about this during the interview.
Yeah.
This kind of already exists.
Yeah.
And, through our own fertility journey, we've had to think about this. When we had our genetic testing for our son, one of the things that genetic testing is for is they will test to see if Down syndrome exists in the fetus. And what you and I were talking about was this exact thing that Émile Torres was talking about, where society is set up that you are incentivized to not want to have a child that would suffer
Right.
with this Down syndrome. That's exist. We can already do that. There's already people that elect based on genetic testing to not have a Down syndrome child because they will suffer in a society that is ableist and not set up for them.
Right.
But the problem isn't necessarily the child. It's that we're in a society that's not set up for them. So literally that stuff that the Dr. Torres was talking about is already happening.
And I think that that's the thing that I get more worried about here, rather than a Gattaca type future where we're just like genetically engineering all the babies to like have, you know, really great eyesight and like blue eyes and blonde hair and like be good at Ubermensch shit. I don't know if we'll ever get there. Whatever. I do think about and have moral dilemmas about what we as a society are going to expand to consider. Oh, well, I as a parent, this is an acceptable reason for me to terminate a pregnancy for quote unquote medical reasons. And that's not to get into any sort of like pro-life, pro-choice argument. It's simply we currently have a window for termination for medical reasons of a fetus. Some people elect to terminate pregnancies when Down syndrome expresses. That's on a weird borderline for me. Some people choose to terminate when things like trisomy, I think 13 and 18 are expressed, which are chromosomal or genetic abnormalities or conditions that will all but ensure a very painful, short, and life full of suffering for a baby that could potentially be born with that.
Short, like day or less, right?
Hours, days, you know, not good. Not good.
Right.
I think that when we continue to hone our like science and technology around like identifying genes for things, it's concerning. It is concerning to think like, oh, what if we identify an autism gene or this gene or that gene? Like, do we live in a society that is going to expand the reasons why we terminate pregnancies?
Well, we can't do that with autism because then nobody would know when the trains are coming.
I mean,
so that would just, society would collapse. But to your point though, yeah, like there's like, I don't know, it's fuzzy, right? It's like there's the slam dunk of like this child, if it survives outside the womb at all, will have like a painful like 2 hours and then suffocate, right? Like that's easy.
Right.
And then there's like on the other side where it's like, I want to terminate this fetus because it's going to have brown eyes. Right. Like that seems pretty bad. And then there's like stuff in the middle where it's like, I mean, I certainly think that on the side of like, I'm way on that side for something like autism.
Right.
But then you go back to like the Down syndrome thing and it's like, yeah, I don't know. Like it seems horrible, but yes, they would suffer in a world not set up for them. You and I were talking, you actually mentioned this, like imagine a world where ableism was a thing of the past and we had systems set up for
we built an infrastructure
people
that accommodated all different kinds of disabilities.
Right. There's like a system waiting for people with this sort of disposition, right?
You know what school you're going to get into. You know what group home you're going to be able to get into. You have government subsidies for various therapies and counselings and the things that you need in order to live a functional, happy life. Then I'm like, well, yeah, like then it seems like a slam dunk. Like, why would you not have that child? But again, goes back to Dr. Torres's but Dr. Torres's scenario where this sort of these pressures of living in a society that is or is not constructed for you still have this, even though there's not a top down, like, you know, sterilize these people, it's still there. And it's disconcerting that it's like it's kind of already there. The pressure from the system to conform to certain standards is like, that's extremely powerful. Yeah, whether or not there's a Hitler type figure saying, do this, do that. Like, it's just, that's a powerful thing. And I think that, I don't know, I think that our society would not be better off if we were able to select for or select out of disability. Like that's not a controversial statement. And I don't think I think our society would be better off building systems around people, not building people around systems.
Yeah, I certainly think that, if we became more homogenized neurotypical, like that would be a net loss for everyone, including the neurotypicals. Speaking of birth control, this also reminds me of a TikTok that we were served, probably because we've been researching this, but there was a sort of an open forum about transhumanism. There was just like a bunch of people came together to discuss transhumanism. And there's a columnist named Mary Harrington that brought up a really good point. I'll try to summarize it here. There's an article I'll link to in the show notes on unheard.com, unheerd.com, where Mary Harrington talks about how transhumanism is already here. And basically what she says is that she considers birth control to be transhuman, which I think I agree with, right? I think that makes sense. Like it's we have taken control of our biology in some way by saying, like, I can now, it's literally in the word, right? Birth control. I can control when I have birth. And so that constitutes something that's transhuman. And she's saying that we have, like 60 years of data now to go on to show that actually doing this sort of thing does lead to exacerbated inequality in society. So like people that have access to birth control are able to retain generational wealth and, protect their power more so than people without money and wealth that can't access birth control. Right. And then that has sort of like a feedback effect. So we already have evidence from the thing we were just talking about regarding genetic testing of fetuses to birth control. Like we already have examples of this doing the things that we were talking about in the interview. I don't really have a question for that other than just pointing out that like this seems to be empirically true.
Right. Yeah. Well, what's this? When you say this?
This concept, this warning that transhumanism
has like inequalities built in.
That transhumanism will constitute an upgrading of inequality, as Émile put it.
Yeah. I don't see how it's not. I mean,
but here's the thing, though. Like, as I think about this, and I've thought about this TikTok a lot, as I'm sure you have. I also go and say, like, all right, so then would I go back in time and uninvent birth control because of this inequality that it's upgraded for us? No.
Right.
I don't know what that means. I don't know if that means I'm just like insensitive to the inequality, or if we just have to accept that there's like bad that comes with the good. I certainly think that it's, at the bare minimum, it's a splash of cold water on the utopian idea of transhumanism. And the good transhumanists that I know, like at least Max Moore has said, I'm not a utopian person. Like they disavow utopianism, even though they kind of do, think about that anyway. But that's like what the word extropian is for.
Right.
But I do think that we have real world examples that show at least that this is not all sunshine and all rainbows.
I think a question for me is, does there exist enough global wealth? Currently not distributed in a way, but does there exist enough global wealth that could theoretically, were it distributed differently, grant equal access to birth control around the world? And if the answer to that is yes, then that supports a belief that I have that a transhumanist future built on the current system of inequality is simply going to exacerbate or reflect that inequality. It's not going to do away with it.
Right.
And perhaps a step to be taken, or some steps to be taken before we start building our future society around TESCREAL beliefs, is fixing and dismantling some of the systems we have now and building something better that can lead to a more equal future.
Yeah, tell that to the accelerationists.
I don't want to talk to
The accelerationists are, and this is why I think, it's we've mentioned before, TESCREAL, not a monolith, right? You have people like Émile, who we've like kind of disparaged in this interview, but also is more on your side in terms of like, hey, let's wait until we figured this out.
Right.
Versus like a Mark Andreessen who's like, pedal to the metal. You know why? Because I'm rich. But I won't say that. I'll say that the AI will fix all these problems for everyone. And you know what? If everything goes wrong, then I have my bunker. So who cares?
Right. I will say that I wish I'd disparaged Eliezer Yudkowsky a little bit less in some of those previous episodes.
Oh, but he's so disparageable, though.
Yes, and also I think that more voices on the side of putting some brakes on some of this stuff is good.
It is. I wish his voice wasn't so, like, zany.
I wish his voice wasn't also calling himself a hero. But he is.
Yeah, but I mean, I would take 2 Eliezer Yudkowskis for every one Mark Andreessen.
Yeah, Mark Andreessen, if you're listening to this.
I will never get funded by Andreessen Horowitz. Which, we definitely need some VC funding for this podcast. If you are listening,
if you are a billionaire who likes to be disparaged, give us your money.
I can make a pitch deck that has the letters A and I in it. I can do that if that's what it takes. I also want to point out, I'm not sure, I think I more agree with you that there is a world in which some of these like enhancement technologies and like control of our biological destiny, blah, blah, blah stuff could be good. I think I agree with you that there exists a scenario where that is a benefit. But it is interesting to hear Émile talk about their opinion that like, I don't know if there's ever anything that's idealized enough that this would be a good thing. This would be a good bit of gasoline to throw on.
Yeah.
I don't think I agree with that, but it's certainly a good point and a good check to say, okay, like, yeah, you're saying if this were in place and if this were in place and if this were in place and if this was solved and if this was fixed and if this was fixed, then it would be totally good. And their point was like, okay, that's pretty unrealistic.
Right.
But, you know, like we always think that like the better society is around the corner. And it's kind of always like inequality is always there. Like even engaging that thought is like pseudo utopian, right? Like as soon as we have the like initial utopia, when we have the socialist utopia, then we can do the transhumanist utopia. Yeah. So I think there's a really good point there too. I don't know if I agree with it, but I also, if I didn't, that might also be a cope. I don't know.
I think there's also like this conversation is going to be imperfect because we're talking about genetically selecting out certain people or not certain people or like
that's always bad.
Yes, but we are having that conversation. Like you and I are both mostly able-bodied folks who are moving through a world that is mostly built for us, and we're speaking for people who have a different experience. Sure. Blah 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 blah. Imperfect conversation. That being said, yeah, I think that it is idealistic to believe that we can achieve a utopia. And there's something that you and Dr. Torres talked about in your interview of like utopia requires somebody being left out.
That was a great point. Yeah.
I think that in turn makes me more interested in, for myself, doing thought experiments on like, how can we build a nice future,
a nice utopia.
That not a nice utopia because we can't have an utopia, but how can we design a society, or how can we build a society that includes the most amount of people,
right,
while excluding, you know, Nazis and those who would tear down such a nice society.
Don't you want diversity of thought, Kayla?
I do want diversity of thought, but I don't want fascism.
I want diversity of thought. THOT.
I want to have lots of different kinds of whores. That's nothing. That didn't get you nothing.
No, I was just in suppressed laughter mode.
I am personally more interested in that type of future thought than like pedal to the metal. How do we make AI solve all of our problems?
Yeah, but the AI will come up with the correct
maybe that's
inclusion.
True.
Look, I'm just presenting the accelerationists.
As long as all the AI is like based on the fucking like language learning from the Enron emails, like I don't give a shit. I cannot. The racism is baked into the AI, and we have to not have that.
Sweet baked goods. Yeah, no, I think the inclusion bit that Dr. Torres and that you were just talking about is huge. I was going to make a big argument about like, well, you know, the solution is just fucking tax the rich, right? Like that's
hell yeah, baby.
Like that's the solution. But I think that there is at least one other big pillar of it needs to be inclusive, and it's not. So I was going to use the quote that they said, I forget the name of their colleague, but you can't design for, you must design with.
Right.
And I just, obviously I moted about it at the time, but I really like it. Like as a designer myself, you know, this is something that you encounter a lot. Like let's take out the, you know, the sort of like inequality, marginalized groups aspect of it and just look at it in terms of like designing a product for a company. If you're designing for, then you're telling the customer what they need and you're going to have a bad product.
Right.
If the customer is telling you what they want, if you're only listening to the customer and it's just there, you know, you're going by the what the analytics say and you don't have any vision of your own, I think that's also bad. So that's why I like with, because it's not for, it's not from, it's with.
Right.
And that to me is what, yeah, sort of is encapsulated by this inclusiveness thing is like, if we're going to design a future, it has to be with, it can't be for. The end. I don't know. That's it. No, the other point, the other pillar I was going to say is this, you know, the tax the rich thing. Like, I know that the ending there that we had was a little bit of a downer, at least in terms of how Émile feels about, I did not intend to rhyme that, but how they feel about the future.
Right.
Pessimistic was the word they used. And I understand that. I think when this is the thing that you're doing for a living, and frankly, this is what they were doing for a living before they were anti-TESCREAL, right? Like they were working on existential risks to humanity. Like this is sort of their bread and butter, right? So I understand like having that notion of pessimism, and I share it sometimes for sure. I don't think like officially on the podcast, I can't really get behind that though. And I'll probably talk about this with you on the couch. I don't think I can get behind it talking with you on the couch either. And the reason for that is that I don't, even after having all of this discussion about like the bankruptcy of the TESCREAL ideology, the bundle of ideologies are diverse enough and have enough like fractures within them and different modes of thinking that I don't think that the issue is with the ideology. And even if the ideology was like plainly evil, like, yeah, we're just going to redo Nazism, like, no, the actual kind, like just plainly evil. Even if it was, it wouldn't necessarily be as much of a problem if it was like two wackos in Indiana, and then the SPLC could write an article about like how dumb these people are, right? Nobody cares. But if it's the richest, most powerful, influential people in all the world that the world has ever seen, maybe, then that's a problem. So regardless of whether it's a good or bad ideology, right? So that's just where it just kind of comes down to the boring answer. It's tax the rich. It's this inequality. It's this power imbalance that we have.
Right.
That's the problem. And it's a boring solution, and it always comes back to that same boring thing. But I think oftentimes solutions are that way.
Do you have hope that that is something we'll see before some sort of horrendous collapse?
That I don't know.
That's the thing that I can get doomer about. And I'm not here to denigrate anyone for being a doomer, and I'm not here to denigrate anyone for being optimistic. I think there's validity to both personally. I tend to be more optimistic myself, but you know, I got to get through the goddamn day.
Loser.
Shut up. That's the thing that I can get doomer about, is that I worry that we're not going to be able to solve some of these quote unquote problems, or solve that particular problem by choice in time before something bad happens. I hope that we're able to get to a point where we can enact systems and taxation that leads to more income equality. Just something better than what we got now. I hope that we have the political will, or will be able to, I don't know, somehow manifest that political will, particularly in the country of the United States, to have something like taxing the extraordinarily wealthy. I have a hard time believing that that will happen before a collapse. And that's what I can get doomer about.
Sure. Yeah, it's a bit of a complex question to answer succinctly, and we're already like getting long. I guess the short answer is still that I don't know.
Right.
But certainly history is full of examples of both.
Right.
History has examples of like, oh boy, we fixed that before it got real shitty. You could even point to, I know this is going to sound weird, but like 18th century England, like that's what Charles Dickens was writing about in Tale of Two Cities.
Sure.
It was like, oh my God, do you see what's happening in France right now? Don't let that happen here. And they kind of enacted some policies to like help the poor, and they actually listened a little. So there's examples of us being able to release the pressure. Okay. And then there's also examples of it, spiraling until something phase changey happens, something threshold crossing happens.
Right.
And I know that's what we're kind of worried about. That's what you're worried about. I don't know. We're definitely in a system that has a feedback loop of like money buys you political power, and political power entrenches your money.
Yeah.
That's not good.
Why does it always come back to capitalism? Capitalism is the code.
Yeah. I don't know, man.
I have a question for you.
But the bottom line is, I think that if there's an answer, like, what do we do next?
Right.
And I'm not smarter than Dr. Torres and his colleagues.
We know what the answer is.
But if I had to sit here and answer it, because I do have to answer it because we're on a podcast, that's my answer. Tax the fucking rich.
I have a question for you.
Okay.
Are we doing the criteria?
Oh, yeah, that's right. We
TESCREAL?
talked about this. So, okay, I thought about this. I think we're running long enough on time that we should forego the criteria now. I think that also we're going to be doing episodes most likely on both EA and L and long-termism.
Okay.
You have a couple episodes coming up. So I think let's do individual criteria for those groups.
Okay. And not test.
And then at some point in the future, whether it's at like the end of one of those episodes, or maybe we do like a very mini-sode where we just like sum up all of the TESCREAL stuff, then we do criteria at that point.
Okay.
Because it's getting long.
I have a prediction.
The prediction is yes.
Colt.
Okay, done. I mean, I don't know. Like,
just
honestly,
across the board.
Honestly, the case that Dr. Torres laid out at sort of the end of the interview there is probably stronger than we would have done with our criteria anyway. So I don't think we're going to beat that. Like, they have, what is the circles? They have doom circle. They have
shame circle. I don't know
shame
what they called
circles.
them, but they were bad. I just want to go on the record right now and say, I love robots. I love the future. I love cyborgs.
I know.
I love AI. I love virtual reality. I love. I do not love it being born from the current system that we have, because then we see robots with guns and transhuman
Boston Dynamics, police dogs.
Transhumanism leading to like genetically selecting for blue eyes only, and I don't like this shit. I like robots. I don't like these robots.
So that's called solar punk, Kayla. So you have to be behind solar punk.
It's called hope punk, baby.
Hope punk?
Yeah.
Did you just make that up?
No, but there's problems with it too.
Hope punk?
Yeah.
I hate that because of the that's not even alliteration. What is that? It's like,
you don't like that glottal stop.
The glottal
hope
stop.
Punk.
Hope
punk.
Is that what they're calling solar punk now, or is it like a different subgenre?
It's a different subgenre.
Oh, well, let's talk about that off show.
Yeah.
Let's go talk about that on the Cult or Just Weird Discord. Links in the show notes.
And then give us money on Patreon.
And give us money on Patreon, please.
Patreon.com/cultureJustWeird.
Unless you're a VC, in which case, let's talk about my routing number for my bank account.
This is Kayla.
And this is Chris.
And this has been
Cult or Just TESCREAL.